Hello, and welcome to the EUROPAST podcast. This podcast is part of the international project EUROPAST, funded from the Horizon Europe Widera program. EUROPAST tackles contemporary issues in memory studies, memory politics, political discourse, and most importantly, public history, a field of study and practice that explores the ways in which the production of knowledge about history can be rendered more democratic, open, collaborative, and empowering, as well as the challenges associated with this process. In this podcast, members of the project team talk to public history practitioners, researchers, historians, activists, filmmakers, and many others about the developments, challenges, and implications of this fascinating approach of dealing with the past. If you would like to know more about the project, follow EUROPAST on Facebook and Twitter. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. My name is Rūta Vyšniauskaitė, and today I'm joined by Professor Machteld Venken. She's a professor of contemporary transnational history at the Luxembourg Center for Contemporary and Digital History and head of its research area on the contemporary history of Luxembourg. Professor Venken has been the leader of 8 scientific projects, including being one of the leaders of the EUCOR project, which we'll talk about today. She's the author of numerous successful publications, and her research interests are transnational, transregional, and comparative histories of Europe, migration, borderlands, oral history, the history of families and children, and citizen science. Professor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, is this your first time here in Vilnius? Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and what brings you to Vilnius?
Thank you very much for that question. No, actually, it's my 3rd time in Lithuania, and it's my 2nd time in Vilnius. I came for the first time to Vilnius 20 years ago. This was in the spring of 2004, and I was about to finish my studies. So I first took a degree in Slavic languages and cultures at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. I am from Belgium. But then I took a second MA degree in European studies, and this was at the Jagiellonen University in Krakow. And so this was the year in which the European Union was going to be enlarged, and we made study trips. And in the spring of 2004, we came to Vilnius, and of course we did sightseeing, but we also were in the office of the EU representation, and we talked about the referendum and about the acquis communautaire. So that is what I remember from my first visit to Vilnius. And then I came back to Lithuania 10 years later, and this was for a scientific conference in Nida. So I flew to Klaipėda. And the conference was organized in collaboration with the German Historical Institute in Warsaw. And it was on the history of East Prussia. And so by the time I there presented a paper that later was published about the experiences of Polish child forced laborers during the Second World War in East Prussia on the basis of their testimony. It was in a way an oral history project. The testimonies were not recorded but written down, transcribed in the 1970s, and I found them in a regional archive in Olsztyn. And then today it's my 3rd time in Lithuania, so I'm very happy to be here.
I know that you're working on a project called EUCOR. What is this project about, and how did it come about?
After the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, I reached out to colleagues, other scholars I knew in Ukraine, and this is the Center for Urban History in Lviv, and I asked what I could do. And they had turned their conference room into a shelter for people on the move overnight. And they had decided that because they have the methodology, they are very experienced interviewers, why they could not simply interview the people sleeping in their conference room. And so then we came up with the idea to do this interviewing not only in Ukraine, but also in other European countries. And so this was an emergency documentation project, which did not have central funding or anything, but was like ad hoc funded by different foundations and institutions. But from the very beginning, we thought that it was important to have like a shared methodology and also shared data protection forms and so on, so that over time this could grow into one central collection. The fall of 2022 or 23, we decided that then we have enough interviews now and we want to move from documentation to research. And this is why we applied to receive a research budget. And this is how EUCOR came into being. So we started on the 1st of January 2024. And who is we? That in itself is also interesting because we consider that the project has 3 principal investigators. So this is Dr. Anna Wilegawa from the Polish Academy of Sciences, and then Dr. Natalia Otreszczenko from the Center of Urban History in Lviv, and then me. And it's very important for us that the 3 of us are equal.
How many researchers additionally are involved in the project?
On the payroll in Luxembourg, we have 3, and in Poland, we have 4. And then I offer in-kind contribution. I receive my salary from the university. And in Ukraine, there are 2 researchers working on it. But then we have a lot of interviewers and transcribers. And they are also paid often through kind of like subcontracting contracts. So the money is going, and this was also from the very beginning very important for us that money goes to Ukraine at this stage, because for people currently living in Ukraine, the situation is often as such that they can receive humanitarian aid, but they cannot receive research funding. And the colleagues I have had the pleasure to meet very much stress that in this situation of war, I mean, that there is a huge desire or like need actually from their part to be able to do research. And if there is one thing I'm happy about, that is that I can contribute in making that happen.
And I saw it in the project website that it says that EUCOR researches the heuristic gesture of collecting, preserving, analyzing, and disclosing testimonies of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Could you explain to our listeners what that means and why this research project is important in that regard?
Yeah, so you have 4 activities. You have the collecting of interviews, and we do not only collect, we actually very much think about and reflect about how we collect. And this is the same for analyzing it. So we discuss various methodologies, how to do it. And then about preserving and disclosing, we consider these not simply like depositing that in an archive, we consider these to be research activities. What is so interesting in EUCOR is that it's gathering an interdisciplinary group of researchers. And there are actually 3 tasks that come together. One is thinking about like doing the interviews and doing the content analysis of the interviews. And then you have a big part that is digital, because these are born digital interviews, and it means that like bringing them together in a central digital environment and making them searchable in itself is considered to be a research activity, which is new. This we didn't have with the Holocaust interviews. Like the digital only came later on. And then a third element is actually the ethics. So the entire exercise of doing this while a war is ongoing. And this means that in all of the activities, let's say collecting, we have the digital, the ethics, and like in this case, the interviewing coming together. And it's through this exchange of different researchers with different fields of expertise that we come to what we hope is an optimal strategy for collecting, for analyzing, for preserving, and for disclosing in the end. And so the whole making of a digital central collection is considered to be research.
To come back a little bit to your work as a researcher and a professor, could you explain what is an open moment in history and why is it important to distinguish it as a separate category?
I am one of the only historians in the project. So it's very interdisciplinary in a way. And how do I motivate as an historian to be involved in interviewing the now? This is a relevant question people could ask. So, but I do think that because I have been doing oral history interviews, because I have been analyzing existing oral history interviews and testimonies and echo documents of witnesses in the past, over the course of the last 20 years, I do have a feeling that I know very much what an historian needs in order to be able to research this entire endeavor of interviewing and giving people a voice, etc. And so I know exactly what I would have wanted to know about the Holocaust interviews that were conducted just after the Second World War, and what I cannot get because this is not how the documents or how the documentation was done. And so at least what I think that I can offer to this project now is that the disciplinary experience of an historian of how I hope future historians would like to see this collection. And this is something that I'm not the first one coming up with this idea. Of course, you see it very much when you look at, for example, historians working with web archives, that they are very, very much in dialogue with digital archivists. It's considered to be a joint dialogue in order to create the archives for the history of the future.
You've written a lot about moments and places of heightened historical legacy, such as periods of transformation and territories around borders in the context of great political changes. Why is it important for you to look for new ways to do research in open moments of history, as you say, such as the war in Ukraine now?
I like this question because it made me reflect on why do I have such an interest in these periods of transformation? And I think it's because these are new situations, whether they are today or whether they used to be in the past, because we're at the end of the First World War and borders change and people end up in a different country. People are confronted with a new situation, and that raises new questions, also research questions, and it asks for new solutions. And I think that I seem to find pleasure in trying to find out what people did at these particular moments in time, in these moments of rupture.
Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on, for example, what new research questions those kind of open situations of open historical legacy raise?
I am within the project responsible for coordinating everything related to data security, and you see that the regulations that are currently laws within the European Union regarding data protection have been created at the moment of peace. They do not consider situations of war, and so if we're talking about data sensitivity in a time of peace, then we're talking about whether or not you're a member of a trade union, and that is considered to be sensitive data. But it's not specified what does it mean to be in a situation of war and what that means in terms of sensitivity. And so we now have to come up with how we define sensitivity. We have to go way beyond the law in order to be able to offer the best kind of best kind of relationship with the interviewees that we have. And this is something we take very seriously. But yeah, and I see it not only with me, but I see it within my institute that from the 40 plus research projects there are in my institute right now, the one EUCOR is the one that is creates the most work in terms of ethics and in terms of data management, and make these not simply documents to fill in at the beginning of the project, but taking these questions along throughout the entire life cycle of the project is something that is a new experience for me and for quite some people I have the pleasure to work with.
So kind of in relation to that, the project emphasizes a collaborative approach, not only in terms of knowledge production, but also in terms of data management. How does this work, and does it create new challenges for researchers?
Yes, thank you for this question. So a key characteristic of EUCOR is that we conduct a second interview with the people, the respondents we already interviewed in 2022 and 2023. So, and this is because we find it important to have a more intense, a deeper relationship with individual interviewees. And we use the second interview, among others, to also reflect, to let them reflect and to reflect with us about how it was for them to do the first interview. Yes, so this is one element where you see this collaboration going on. The second element that we wrote in the grant proposal and that we intend to start working on in the fall now of 2024 is to present the interviewees the digital display of their interview. So this is how your interview is included in a digital system. What do you think about it? And this shows you that when you're working with such a born digital collection, you can actually do that. And so I cannot say that we can give every interviewee the possibility to change little things here and there, because then our data model is not going to hold, and the central searchability of the collection cannot be guaranteed. But making this not an activity at the end of the project that you deposit all of it in an archive and they have to figure out how they create a database, but actually create a database during the project and the model of this database to do it in an iterative way and through this kind of consultation rounds with the interviewees themselves. We believe that has the potential to actually come up with something that is stronger and also more supported by this community of interviewees.
And I'm sorry, just to come back a little bit, what does the digital display look like? I'm just trying to imagine what these participants are looking at when they're trying to reflect on their experience.
Yeah. So at this moment, we're working with a data assessment program, and this is called CAT-DV. And we're doing that because at the University of Luxembourg, we have a person, Alexandre Germain, a technician who has 20 years of expertise in working with it. And so it's a very nice cooperation. And so the data are included. It means it's the interview, it's the transcription of the interview, but you also have this metadata. So there's this information about the person. And so we try it. That is how the data are then searchable. And they're at this moment looking at this environment, but it's not guaranteed that this will be the sole place where all this data will always be. It's currently at the University of Luxembourg because this is our work package, but we do consider this collection to be Ukrainian cultural heritage. And so where we would like to have it in the end is not on the servers of the University of Luxembourg. And this is also what we are working on within the project, but you have to give us some time because we only started in January this year.
So apart from the relevance of the topic of the project itself, EUCOR is important because it explores new ways of doing research, as you said, and their impact on knowledge production in contemporary society. So far, what have been the most interesting or influential takeaways of this part of the research?
What proved itself already very fruitful, according to me, is the research design of the project. I haven't done this before, and the way we composed it, so we have these 3 partners, and each partner specialized in one specific topic. So, and we have Poland for content analysis, we have Ukraine for ethics, and then we have Luxembourg for the digital. And this immediately provokes interesting discussions, whatever topic, like if it's about collecting or analyzing, and just the fact that you cannot take for granted your own methodologies, but you have to exchange it. And there we have already examples of how we have the feeling that we're coming to better solutions thanks to these kind of discussions. And we don't have findings yet. That's the beginning of the project. But for me, it's fascinating to see how these conversations go, like how we go into this loop of this exchanges with the 3 different elements taking into consideration, and how that shapes us to prepares us to making specific solutions for the project. It sounds maybe very abstract at this point, but I truly believe in it, actually. Yeah.
Taking our conversation a little bit further, how does this concept and purpose of the UCOR project relate to public history?
Well, it's the most public project I have done in my life as a researcher. So when I'm now talking about Luxembourg, I have the feeling we're very, very close to the public. So we're actually on the Facebook groups, but that were specifically created for Ukrainians arriving in Luxembourg after February 2022. We have on the team a Ukrainian displaced scholar who is actually doing the interviews with the community she's very well integrated into. We are on the radio. We have been on national Ukrainian television. So we have done, as our institute, also a kind of evening in which we reach out to the public. And it's called Forum Z. And we do it once, 2 or 3 times a year in our institute. And it was interesting to see that on this UCOR evening, we had the list of participants, which was completely different than from other ones. So you see that we reached out to a different section of the population living in Luxembourg. So in terms of reaching out to the public or being in contact with the public, I think it's very, very visible. For example, so my office at the university is also used for the interviewing. So it means that you have Ukrainians with temporary refugee status in Luxembourg coming to the university and doing the interview in my office. So it brings the public very much in the very space where research is conducted. UCOR, according to me, it's also a project related to history. And what I think I can contribute is the way I think about time, which is sometimes different than scholars from different other disciplines. So especially also in terms of impact, and what is now very important is this impact measurement. And according to me, it's very important that we have these testimonies. And at this point, we don't know yet how many of them at what point are going to be can be disclosed at this moment when a war is still ongoing. But just think about the Belarusian Oral History Archive. It's closed right now, and they have interviews with dissidents from Belarus. And at this moment, it's too dangerous, or it's considered not appropriate to make these interviews available. But at some point they will, and at some point they will have a value. And I'm very happy with that kind of perspective. I'm very happy that at this very moment in time, we do collect these voices. Nonetheless, what will happen within the next 5 years? My timeline is a much longer timeline.
And just off the top of my head, I think the idea that these oral testimonies are going to be part of, I think, as you said, Ukrainian cultural heritage or national heritage is also quite impactful in many ways for Ukrainians themselves, not only the people who've participated, but maybe some other people who are interested in the topic.
Yes, it's of course, what we are doing is financed through research money, and it is very much fundamental scientific research, but it's much more than that also. And we always, with the three principal investigators, so Natalia Otryshenko and Anna Vilegawa, we always do this exercise on, okay, we do meet the criteria of scientific excellence, but especially also for the Center of Urban History, they are not going to stop thinking about this project once the research funding is not longer available. This is something that stays with us much longer. And one other element is what do we do? For example, like the academic publishing is in English, but we find it very important to also publish in national languages and to reach out to other people. We find it very important that with time you have the interviewers and the transcribers who can also have access to the materials, even if their first interest is not to publish in high quality international journals, as it is required within these kind of international research grants. So we're doing both at the same time. It's sometimes, requires quite some creative thinking from the three of us, but we're very happy to do now.
Professor Venken, thank you very much for talking to us, and enjoy the rest of your time in Vilnius.
I will. Thank you very much for having me.